Hey guys, so we're going to be talking about the sleep chapter today, which I think is probably one of the coolest things we're going to be talking about. I want you to enjoy this meme, of course. But anyway, alright, so let's talk about sleep. Ask yourself right now, which stage of sleep is the most restorative? And more often than not, you're probably going to say REM sleep, right? But for those of you who've skimmed the chapter a little bit, you should notice that the correct answer is stage 4. Good. So stage 4 is actually the most restorative for sleep. So the goal here for your sleep cycle is to spend as much time in stage 4 as you can. Contrary to popular belief, REM sleep is actually not that helpful. In fact, it mimics wakefulness more than anything. So your brain is highly active. And when your brain's highly active, it's using a lot of cells, it's using a lot of energy. And when your goal in sleep is to restore functioning, you can imagine that high metabolism in the brain is just going to wear you down. So we're going to talk about that. So a couple of things we're going to talk about in this lecture. What's the purpose of sleep? There are many different theories about why it is that humans sleep. But from the physiological perspective, we're just going to cover 2. Then we're going to talk about sleep stages. There are 5 stages of sleep. And then dreaming. Briefly going to touch on the physiological explanations for dreaming, as well as when it happens, and neurally what's going on. So, let's talk about purposes of sleep. Yeah, okay. So we're going to answer these questions in the chapter. Sorry. What is the purpose of sleep? I don't know how many of you guys sleep with an animal, and I'm not talking about your partner. But sleeping with animals is, I think, kind of a cool thing, right? So dogs don't typically go cuddle other non-dog species, especially not cats. No one cuddles cats, right? So it's kind of interesting from a social perspective how humans and dogs alike are both drawn together for sleeping. And I think, and this is just an aside, I'm not going to test you on this, it's interesting to see, or to ask yourself why that is from an evolutionary perspective. Why do we sleep with other people? And I'm not meaning that in a sexual way. It's just why is sleeping next to someone a sign of intimacy, right? Because you're at your most vulnerable. So to be vulnerable with another animal, and that animal is vulnerable, I think is an interesting bonding experience. So, alright, so the first theory about why we sleep, or the theory of sleep in general, is called the recuperation theory. And this basically says you do a lot of cellular damage throughout the day. When you're using your brain, you're thinking, you're causing, your cells to use their energy, and at night, you're shutting that down to some extent for reparation and restoration. So, or recuperation, right? So we want to restore what's called homeostasis, which is a fun way of saying everything is balanced in the body. So this is an explanation for why we sleep. We want to restore. Then the other one is adaptation. Now this one is less about why we sleep. It's more about when we sleep. So why is it that humans tend to sleep at night? Regardless of, some other cultures in the world where some people sleep during the day because it's hot outside, most humans sleep whenever it is dark. Over, tons of evolutionary experience, we've developed specialized brain structures, which we'll talk about later, that react specifically to changes in light. And through experience, this reaction may be in accordance with when our biggest predators come out, right? So think about what a human's biggest predator might be from a hunter-gatherer perspective. You're going to have things like tigers, you're going to have lions, mostly big cats, maybe hyenas. I guess we all live in Africa. Think about, over here in the North America, you're going to have wolves, right? Wolves are kind of bad for humans. Or like a really angry bison, maybe. So Yeah, the humans predators typically are supposedly would have come out at night, and in response to that, our bodies adapted so that we happen to become sleepy at night. So that's a theory. One time I asked people what a major predator of humans is, and they said barracudas. So there's that. Alright, so sleep stages. Not all sleep is equal, and you don't just fall instantly into deep sleep. So, what happens there? Well, first of all, the way that we found out about these stages of sleep is through EEG, which is electroencephalogram, and all that stands for electro meaning electric, and cephalo meaning head, and then gram meaning measurement. Okay, so we're measuring the electrical waves of the head. Alright, so typically you'll have a whole bunch of electrodes placed onto your head, and it looks different varying on the different places that you go for a study, or you have a little EEG cap on that you sleep with. And throughout the night, there's going to be this chronic output about what kinds of activities going on in your brain. And when you have really short wavelengths, it's measuring a whole bunch of different types of wavelengths, by the way. We're just going to be talking about 2, but there are so many. But when the waves look like this, you're going to say, okay, so this person's alpha waves, for example, are really, intense right now, so they're awake. But when you start seeing stuff like this, that may indicate that that person is in a sleep state, a deeper sleep state. So let's talk about that. We've got 2 categories. I said earlier that there's 5 stages. We have 2 categories. Stages 1 through 4 are in this first category, which is non-REM sleep. So your 2 categories are REM sleep and non-REM sleep. Pretty straightforward. So with non-REM sleep, you've got stages 1 and 2 consist of light sleep. Stages 3 and 4 are deep sleep, and we tend to refer to this as slow wave sleep, okay, or deep sleep. Regardless, if in class we're mentioning stage 3 or 4, that means you're way deep down in the sleeps. REM sleep is actually a paradox. It's very odd, and we still to this day don't quite understand why we have it. So that's open for debate right now. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. So the way that we categorize whether someone is in either of these any of these stages, is through categorizing their output from the EEG. Alpha waves are going to measure wakefulness or very light sleep like daydreaming, and delta waves are going to measure deeper sleep. Okay, so you see alpha waves up here. We're not going to be talking about beta or theta. If you care about it, go to grad school. But delta waves are basically the opposite of alpha in this case. So if you have a high frequency of alpha waves, you're probably going to have a lower frequency of delta and vice versa. So stage 1, right, this is non-REM stage 1. This is when you don't even know that you've been asleep, right? You're like Charles Barkley here, falling asleep without even really knowing it. Or basically when you're just beginning to fall asleep. So you see here, what kind of waves would those be? Alpha waves. Okay, so there's indicative of wakefulness. Sleep spindles, which we get in stage 2 here, are one indication we use that this person is going from stage 1 to stage 2. So they're getting deeper into sleep. All right. So these sudden bursts of fast short waves are called sleep spindles. All right. Then we have K complexes, which are basically like a jump, a brief jump into a delta wave. And so if you've ever fallen asleep and you feel like you're really getting sleepy, and then it seems like you kind of get deeper for a second and come back, where you're like that. That may be an example of a K complex, you going through a K complex. Conversely, if you've got a sudden, spindle of really tight waves, that may be like where you wake up all of a sudden really quickly, or you may have your hypnic knee jerk and you kick your dog or something. Which, why we have those is also completely up to debate. So, stage 3 is similar to stage 2, except it's got a lot more, it's got a whole bunch more delta, K complexes. Okay, so stage 2 and stage 3 look really similar, but we categorize stage 3 as deep sleep because of the much more common instances of the K complexes, which if you notice here, K complexes look very similar to each of the peaks in your delta waves. Okay, so it's kind of a hybrid between 2 and 4, but we're going to lump it in with 4 for now. So stage 4 is your deepest sleep. So you see the difference here in your delta waves between here and here. So during slow wave sleep, you are pretty much in complete delta state. So your output, your EEG output, is going to be doing a whole lot of this. Okay, think big lolling waves in the ocean. All right. So like I said earlier, the goal here is to stay in this stage the longest because it is the most restorative. So, not REM. Okay, so now let's talk about REM sleep. REM sleep is down here. Now what I want you to notice is check out how these waves look. They don't look very close to delta waves. They in fact look like what? Yeah, kind of look like alpha waves, right? And that's very true. And why it is not restful. In fact, it's the opposite. It's stimulating. So there are a couple of characteristics that I need you to know about REM sleep. So, because if we don't have these, something is unusual and usually wrong. One thing that happens during REM sleep is you encounter what's called core muscle atonia, loss of muscle tone. So if tone means tone, like clonic tonic, tonic means rigid. Atonia means lack of tone, right? You're not paralyzed, you're not stiff. It's the total opposite. It's where you are like a spaghetti noodle, okay? You have no tone in your muscles. Rapid eye movement, which is what REM stands for, rapid eye movement sleep. And lo and behold, we have no explanation for why humans do this, other than, you know, maybe it's to lubricate the eyeball or something while you're asleep. I think all mammals have REM sleep like this. Anyway, and additionally, it's similar to wakefulness. So as you can see here, the waves are very similar to these stage 1 waves. In addition, if we have someone in REM sleep in an fMRI, we see that they have similar amounts of oxygen consumption occurring in their brain. So it's as though they're awake, but they're not. Same thing with blood flow, same thing with neural firing. So if you ask yourself during which stage might people have their most of their dreams, you can imagine it would be REM sleep, right? Because it's already primed for work, essentially. So what I want to convey to you here is this is one sleep cycle. Okay, you're not going to pay attention to the thing in your book that says that, you know, the first time you go through it, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about that. We're just starting right here, okay? So stage 1, you're awake, you're falling asleep, you go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, REM sleep, back down to stage 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's cycle 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, cycle 3. Okay, you get the point. I'm going to show you in a second kind of what that looks like. So this here, stage 1 through REM, for the average person lasts around 90 minutes. That's an hour and a half for you to get from stage 1 through REM. Okay? And then when you start on the other side of REM, that starts a second cycle. Okay, so 90 minutes is approximately one cycle. So if you sleep 8 hours and your cycles are 90 minutes long each, how many sleep cycles will you have? What I want you to do right now is pause this video and calculate that. How many sleep cycles will you have? How many stages 1 through REM and then back down will you have? Okay. The answer is 5.5, roughly. Now, this is a strange example because this person's sleep cycle is roughly 2 hours long, which is totally possible. Okay, some people's sleep cycles are 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 65 minutes. It's completely arbitrary and matters only to the exact person. My sleep cycles, for example, are quite a bit longer than average. So I have to get either like way more sleep than the average person to net a good amount of deep sleep, or I have to wake up at a very specific time so that I'm not caught in the middle of a deep sleep in my cycle. So this person's sleep cycles are about 2 hours long. How do we know that? Well, stage 1 all the way down to 4 and then back up again to REM, that's 1 cycle. So technically, yes, you are going from stage 3 and 4 all the way back up right here to REM. That's 1 cycle, and you see that that ends from 0 to 2, so that's 2 hours. Okay, the second one starts right here. So let me walk you through this, because you're going to have to identify this stuff on the exam for sure. So, all right, cycle 1, down and up. The end of the REM cycle is cycle 1. Cycle 2, while we're answering questions, I forgot about that. How long is this person's typical cycle? 2 hours. How many sleep cycles do they get in one night? Well, if we walk through all this, that's around 4.5. So this person, in an 8-hour period, gets 4.5 cycles, whereas the person who has a 90-minute cycle length gets about 5.5. But if you're not spending your cycles in deep sleep, then it changes the importance of how many cycles you have, right? So this person has had about 4.5. So you can map out where they begin and where each one ends based on the loops here. Okay? So let's look at it. These are called hypnograms, by the way. Hypnograms. Let's look at this person's sleep cycle. You'll notice, let me push this down here. You'll notice that we have early sleep and we have late sleep. Okay, if you've ever felt that you've slept very well for the first couple of hours at night and then you wake up, or you just sleep like really crappy for the rest of the night, that's normal. Okay, and it sucks, but I mean it is really common. The reason for that is because those first couple of sleep cycles are the only ones where you're typically going to actually get to deep sleep. So you notice that later on, after you've been in a sleep marathon, which is what I call like a straight up 8-hour session, you're going to get diminished returns. So you're going to spend more time in REM sleep as the night moves on, less time getting into that, much coveted stage 3, stage 4 sleep. So you're going to feel like it's, like I said, just diminished returns. So I'll have students who are like, I could sleep for 12 hours and I still don't feel rested. And honest to God, this was me up until I taught this damn course. Okay, because I didn't know about this. So the reason for that is because you're getting diminished returns. I just like saying diminished returns because it sounds cool. So just say it. Diminished returns, man. So you see here the explanation behind this is that you're not even getting anything important out of those last few hours. Does that mean that you should only sleep for like a couple of hours a night after you're done with your slow wave sleep? No, not necessarily, because there is merit to spending time in these other stages. It's just not as fruitful. So let's talk about this guy's hypnogram. How many hours is this person asleep? Okay, so what I want you to do is pause the video here, and I want you to answer these 3 questions. How many hours is this person asleep? How many sleep cycles do they have? And how long were they in deep sleep? Just a rough estimate. Okay. So what we see here is this person slept, let's see, midnight to 6:30. They slept about 6.5, 7 hours. Okay, let's say okay, so that would be 6:30 and then they're up. All right, so 6.5 hours. How many sleep cycles did they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5. Okay, so 5.5 to 6. What qualifies it as 5.5 or 6? I don't know. On the exam, I'm not going to give you 5.5 or 6. I'm going to be like, I'm actually not even going to ask you that. Okay? I'm going to make you draw me something like this to show me how someone is sleeping. Okay, and I'll give you more examples of that later. So how long were they in deep sleep? They were only in deep sleep, if we say like 12:30 to 1:30, and then like 2 to 2:30, so like 1:30, 1, so like 2 hours maybe? Oh God, my math is probably wrong. But you get my point. out of those 6.5 hours that they slept, only 2 of those were in like the true restoration period. Now you also see here that this person had brief awakenings throughout the night. So in this other example, where this person doesn't get to wakefulness, they get to REM sleep, in that case, you may experience what seems like wakefulness, but you're actually not. This is true wakefulness, where you wake up and you look at the clock and you're like, okay, well, I'm not asleep. You know, I still have a few hours left, and you roll over. So that is different, and we don't want many of those. They are common, but we don't want many of them because it's kind of a big interruption. We want to just roll right through REM sleep back into the good stuff. What about this person? Oh, so here we're answering a few important questions. Again, pause the video and then just answer these questions yourself. It really does help when you guys do that because it's much more beneficial for your memory. You create stronger synapses and such whenever you do it yourself versus me telling you. So which part of this graph kind of explains the adaptation theory? So why we sleep at night? I would guess this right here. So we see a lot of nighttime awakenings. This is really common. Like from a hunter-gatherer perspective, maybe the adaptation theory says that we sleep at night, but we need frequent nighttime awakenings to see if predators are around or something like that. Or, you know, if Joe with his weird sleepwalking issue gone out to the damn tiger nest again, gotta go chase him down. That's the most redneck thing I've ever said. So the second part, which part possible explanation of the recuperation theory? So obviously that's going to be right here where you see that growth release occurs. Growth hormone is released from your pituitary gland, right? So we talked about growth hormone being released heavily during puberty, which is why you have your big growth spurt and such. Changes your bones and everything. But human growth hormone is actually released throughout your whole life. It just gets less and less concentrated as you grow out of puberty. So anytime that you stress your body out, growth hormone is going to be released during deep sleep to help recuperate you, okay, build everything back up. How long was this person in deep sleep? I ain't going to calculate it, but they were in it for quite a few cycles here. This is unusual. This person is a very good sleeper. And so we've shown here that, you know, time spent in REM increases throughout the night. So here's your diminished returns. All right. That's my gang sign. Arthritis hands. Okay, so what about this? This person, okay, here's your stage 4. Here's wakefulness. This person is awake like all the time. And has very little time in deep sleep, so they're going to feel like trash when they wake up the next day. So the quality of sleep is horrible. We would say that this could be indicative of a possible disorder. This person may have some sort of intermittent insomnia where they can't stay asleep, or they're very sensitive to their surroundings. Like if I sleep in a new place, if I stay with some friends for a weekend or something, I cannot sleep. I will hear every sound that house makes. What about something like sleep apnea? So that's a sleep disorder, and a lot of people don't know they have it, but basically this is what your hypnogram would look like for the night. Because you're chronically being woken up by, you know, your whole lack of breathing thing. We'll get to that a little bit later. All right, so now let's talk about dreaming. When do we dream? Do we just instantly start dreaming as soon as we close our eyes? Not typically. So in some studies, what we'll do is we'll bring people into the lab, we'll have them sleep, and then, you know, after some practice, of course, so that they actually can sleep in the lab because it's really awkward. And then we hook them up to an EEG so we can measure what stage of sleep they're in. And when they're in REM sleep, we wake them up and we say, what was happening? 80% of the time, those people are going to report that they were dreaming. Okay. Consequently, if we wake someone up during their deep sleep, or stages like 2 or 3 or whatever, only 7% of those patients would report that, or only 7, I can't remember if it's only 7% of the patients or 7% of the time, well, either way, it's a small number, of those people will say that they were having a dream. So it's, according to this study anyway, you're much more likely to be dreaming in REM sleep than you are in non-REM sleep. And that makes sense, because if you're in non-REM sleep, your deep sleep, you don't want a whole bunch of neural firing going on, because that's tiring your brain out. Additionally, the types of dreams that you have are going to vary. So in REM sleep, you're more likely to have these crazy, super imaginative, just unbridled, wild dreams. And I cannot even tell you how many times I will have these epic dreams that would make such cool movies, and I need to talk to Steven Spielberg, because these would just be so awesome. I mean, they're like apocalyptic, like deep, moving types of movies that would be so cool. So I basically invented like most of the most recent awesome movies from my brain. Just kidding. So when you wake someone up during non-REM sleep, they're going to be like, oh, I was dreaming about doing work, or I was dreaming about chores or something. So if you've ever had I had a dream a few months ago that I was a necklace. Okay, and I sat on a neck, and I was a necklace, and it was the most boring dream ever. And it was just like pan shots of the necklace the whole time with me, and it just... Anyway, so you're less likely to have dreams and less likely to have interesting dreams whenever you're in non-REM sleep. What are some common beliefs about dreams? There are a lot of myths and a lot of untruths out there. So, true or false? I want you to try to answer these and maybe pause to try to answer for yourself. It's better for you. True or false? You incorporate external stimuli into your dreams. What do I mean by that? If it's raining outside, are you going to start dreaming about rain? If someone is tickling your foot, you're going to have dreams about something being on your foot. True or false? Well, we don't do this in studies necessarily, but in one study we took participants in to the lab, had them go to sleep, and while they were in REM sleep, we spritzed them just very lightly with a mist of water. And that mist of water was more likely to make the participants wake up and they say, oh, I was having a dream about it raining. Okay, so that's one piece of evidence we know that, yes, you can incorporate external stimuli into your dreams. For me, the most common thing that happens is my freaking alarm clock gets integrated into my dream, and then I'll just not wake up to it. So this is suddenly, so I had like one of my favorite songs as my ringtone for a while, and I learned to not do that because, or as my alarm tone, because I would just suddenly be like rocking out in my dream, and it would just like, so I'd be like a necklace, right? And then my favorite song would come on, and the necklace would just start pulsing to the beat, and suddenly I was Michael Jackson, right? So it just would take off on like a whole new thing. So now I have this irritating sound, the meh, meh, meh. And the other day it did not help at all. And in my dream, everything was just kind of pulsing to the sound of the alarm, and I didn't wake up. It was awful. So that was a true thing. So, true or false? Dreams only last an instant. That's false. Just gonna throw that one out, because dreams actually do seem to happen in real time. So if you feel like a dream has only lasted an instant, then it's likely it probably did. If you feel like you had a marathon dream that lasted for a long time, odds are you probably did. And the reason we know this is because the part of your brain that tracks time is not suppressed during sleep. Now rationality, oh yeah, that's something different. But time tracking seems to be something that's still on internally. So if we have participants go to sleep, we wake them up either 5 minutes or 15 minutes after they've started their REM sleep. They start having dreams, and we ask them, how long do you think you were asleep? We ask them, how long was that dream? If we woke them up 5 minutes in, they're more likely to say, oh, I think that dream was about 5 minutes. Same thing with 15 minutes. So that's a piece of evidence for you. Some people do not dream at all. True or false? False. How do we know this? Well, they're just really efficient sleepers, or they wake up at a point after they've completely stopped dreaming. So you'll take people who are like, I've never had a dream before in my life, bring them into the lab, hook them up to the EEG, and then we wake them up in the middle of REM sleep, and lo and behold, they're like, oh my God, you were there to witness my first ever dream. And that's not true. Everyone dreams. It's just you're less likely to remember them if you wake up in a stage where, like stage 3 or something like that, where you probably haven't been dreaming at that point. All right, true or false? Sleep talking and sleepwalking, also known as somnambulism, occur during REM sleep. And when you get a minute, watch this dang video because it is funny. Answer to that is false. You cannot sleep talk or sleepwalk while you are in REM sleep. In fact, the time that you are likely to sleepwalk and talk is during stage 4. And we know this because these people end up being like kind of dead to the world, because their brains are like turned off essentially. So sleepwalking is not something you should be doing. And when I say it's not necessarily a natural thing, but it is common. It is most common with children because their brains are still getting developed and things can go awry. People who get stressed out are more likely to sleepwalk, and that's because your brain isn't supposed to be stressed out, so it acts strangely. So during REM sleep, the reason you can't walk or talk, etc. during REM sleep is because of this core muscle atonia that happens during REM sleep. And the area of the brain that's responsible for this core muscle atonia is the nucleus magnocellularis. Basically, that's right here. If we were to do a, I believe this, yeah, this is the pineal gland. So this is a horizontal view of the brainstem with your thalamus here, right? So it's an area here, nucleus magnocellularis is an area right here that is within your reticular formation. So if you remember seeing the stripes that go up the center of the brainstem, that's one of the pieces of that stripe. So when that becomes active, your motor cortex shuts down. Okay, so that's this right here. So if we were to lesion this, for example, this area can't turn off the motor cortex while you're in REM sleep, and that leads to a very dangerous disorder, which we'll talk about later. All right, so now the activation synthesis theory of dreaming. Why is it that we dream according to our theory here? Well, okay, so Freud would tell you, I hope you enjoy this meme. Freud would tell you that all of your dreams have really important meanings. You got your manifest crap and all that stuff. That's not what we're going to discuss in this class, okay? A disclaimer, whatever you believe dreams are, that's fine. It's totally up to you, and it's not up to me to tell you otherwise. What I'm proposing here is that if we had to assign a biological explanation for why humans and other mammals dream, this is the best thing we could come up with. Okay, that's not saying it's true, that's not saying it's false. That's just if we had to explain it. So our main theory in physiopsych is Hobson's activation synthesis theory. Now this is a big word, but basically activation synthesis means we're going to be synthesizing, bringing together activations. That's all it means. And the dude named Hobson is the one that discovered it, or the one that came up with it. So what this theory poses is that REM sleep results in random brainstem activity. So just because you're in REM sleep doesn't mean that your brainstem has stopped communicating with your cortex, or it stopped receiving and sending signals throughout your body. You still need to breathe, right? So, of course, everything's still going to be going. The theory here is because during REM sleep, your frontal lobe shuts down, right? So your nucleus magnocellularis is shutting down that motor cortex. Well, also, your prefrontal cortex is shutting down during REM sleep. Okay? So it has to make sense It has to interpret the data that's still coming in to the best of its ability, and it has no idea what to do with it, which is what results in dreams. Okay, which is why dreams can be random. Sometimes they can basically strum a pathway of memory networks that are already in there, which is why you can sometimes dream about things that have happened to you, or you can have recurring dreams. At least that's the biological explanation for it. So one explanation for why you may have such, I say hyper-emotional, because a lot of dreams you can have very, very intense emotional feelings, is because this prefrontal cortex is shut down, right? So if your prefrontal cortex has been shut down, you don't need it while you're sleeping. Your limbic system then, which let's not forget about our subcortical structures, your limbic system goes crazy because it's getting all these signals from the thalamus, and the frontal lobe isn't telling it what's normal and what's not. So it's just like free-for-all fireworks party, and it's making the brain react to all these random data that are just by default coming through from normal bodily processes. That's the explanation for why we dream from a biological standpoint. So to revisit this, it makes, I'm not going to test you on this, I'm just trying to scare you. It makes sense, based on all of these areas in the brainstem here, why there's so much random signaling coming in. Or it's not really random necessarily, it's information that's good to have for your body to stay functioning while you're asleep. So your body, your brain, areas of your brainstem are going to be sending afferent and efferent signals to keep your organs moving. It's going to send information for tissue repair. Everything that exists is still happening here while you are asleep. It's just that frontal lobe can't rationalize it. So this is kind of the pathway. Here's your nucleus magnocellularis. It also goes by like 5 other names, which is really stupid, and I wish we'd just pick something, but we're scientists, that's not possible. But anyway, information can come through this pathway, and then once it gets to your limbic system, or first your thalamus, then here's your cingulate here, or no, that's not your cingulate. Yeah, cingulate's up here, right? So this is your corpus callosum. Then it's going to be passed on to the cortex, and the cortex is like, what? So don't write that on an exam. So again, you know, the additional thing is that your reticular formation and areas of your brainstem are the primary creators and releasers of a lot of our major neurotransmitters. So we talked about the basal forebrain being the major house for acetylcholine. It's also produced here. Major places, definitely basal forebrain. Epinephrine obviously is going to be your adrenal glands, but here we see it's also produced in the brain. Same thing with norepinephrine, which I told you guys that norepinephrine is a bit more cerebral anyway for focus and motivation, so it makes sense that there's a lot of it housed here. Now serotonin is primarily created and released from your RAF nuclei here. Okay, these guys right here are the major producers of serotonin. And then we have dopamine, which of course begins in the substantia nigra right here. Okay, so you kind of see where everything begins. So just in sum, I mean, you can pause the screen and end the video now, but I'll walk you through this if you care about it. Alpha versus delta waves, know the difference between those, and how to detect them, like what they look like on a graph. How do they translate to the different stages of sleep also? So if someone's having, you know, like alpha waves versus delta waves, what stage of sleep might they be in, etc. So the sleep stages in the hypnogram are really important. We want to know, we're going to get to quality, sleep quality in a little while, but basically, what's the cycle length, like 2 hours versus 90 minutes, etc. How to detect the number of cycles that someone's had in a night. As far as REM sleep goes, we know that we have some major physiological things here. So you have a lot of symptoms to wakefulness in the brain, but also you have core muscle atonia, which is caused by increased activity in the nucleus magnocellularis, which therefore decreases, it's an inhibitory pathway actually. So it decreases activity in the motor cortex, thereby basically preventing you from moving. Then dreaming, we have, let me move my screen here. Dreaming, you need to know about the Hobson's activation synthesis theory. Okay, and our explanation for why you have crazy dreams. So that's that. Hope that you guys enjoyed it, and we'll pick up on this on Wednesday.